There is a name for what happens when you stay too long in the wrong career. Not the feeling. Most people have words for that. What happens to everything else? Because here is what the standard conversation about career dissatisfaction misses entirely. It focuses on the unhappiness. It treats the problem as an emotional one. You feel bad at work, and that is the cost. But that is not actually the ledger. The real ledger is what that unhappiness is quietly doing to the parts of your life that have nothing to do with work. Your relationships, your cognitive sharpness, your creativity, your health, your future options. Those are the 5 domains where the cost of staying in the wrong career compounds silently, invisibly, and in a direction that makes change harder with every passing year. That is what this video is about. Not whether you are unhappy, you already know that. What you may not know yet is what that unhappiness is actually charging you for. There is a specific word people use when they are staying in a career that no longer fits. That word is managing. It's not great, but I'm managing. A lot of people have jobs they don't love. I'm managing. It's not bad enough to justify blowing everything up. I'm managing. Here is what managing actually means, translated precisely. It means the cost is real, but you have found a way to not look at the full amount. This is not a character failure. It is a completely rational adaptation to a cost structure that is genuinely hard to see. Because the costs of staying in the wrong career are not delivered in one bill. They are delivered in small, recurring charges across multiple accounts. In a currency your nervous system has learned to discount. The chronic, low-level drain of maintaining professional competence you no longer believe in. The specific exhaustion of presenting a version of yourself at work that stopped fitting years ago. The dull background awareness that the gap between who you are at work and who you are everywhere else has been widening, not closing. Research on chronic occupational stress consistently shows something that surprises people when they first encounter it. The damage from long-term low-grade misalignment is not less severe than acute job crisis. In many cases, it is more severe because the alarm system never fires. Your brain adapts to a manageable level of distress the same way it adapts to background noise. After enough time, you stop noticing it consciously. But the cost is still being paid. The reason you cannot see this clearly is structural. The accounting system you are using charges you for the cost of leaving visibly, specifically, immediately. Financial disruption, identity uncertainty, the conversation you would have to have with people who won't understand. Those costs have line items. Your brain runs the numbers on them constantly. The cost of staying has no line items. It arrives as relationship friction you attribute to stress. As creative flatness you attribute to getting older. As health symptoms you attribute to everything except the 8 hours a day you spend performing a professional identity that exhausts you. That asymmetry, visible cost of leaving, invisible cost of staying, is not a perception error. It is a feature of how the human nervous system processes chronic versus acute threat. Understanding it does not fix it immediately. But it does change the question. The question is no longer, is this bad enough to justify leaving? The question is, what has staying already cost, and what is it costing right now, today, in accounts I haven't been checking? So, the ledger. 5 domains. Named specifically, not to produce panic, to produce clarity. Because you cannot make a real decision about a cost you cannot see. Domain 1. Relationships. The performance tax does not end when you leave the office. Anyone who has been in this knows that specific experience. Arriving home after a day of performing professional competence you no longer believe in and having nothing left. Nothing dramatic, just nothing available. The patience required to be present with the people you love most draws from the same account that the performance tax has been draining all day. What this produces over time is not conflict, necessarily. It is distance. A slow, gradual narrowing of emotional availability that partners and children register, even when they cannot name it, as the person they love being slightly, persistently not there. This is not a relationship problem. It is a career problem that the people closest to you are paying for. Domain 2. Cognitive vitality. The human brain, operated below its actual capacity for long enough, begins to adapt downward. This is not a dramatic decline. It is a quiet one. The specific sharpness that comes from working on problems that genuinely engage your intelligence begins to dull when it is not exercised. The curiosity that used to drive you to read, to explore, to make connections, suppressed daily by work that doesn't require it, begins to thin. People in long-term career misalignment frequently describe a version of this without naming it. I used to be sharper. I don't have ideas the way I used to. I feel like something's gone a little flat. That flatness is not age. It is what sustained cognitive underutilization does to a mind that was built for more. Domain 3. Creative erosion. This one is quieter and arrives later, which makes it harder to connect to its cause. Creative capacity is not a fixed resource. It is a muscle, and it is one of the first casualties of a career that does not use your actual intelligence, not because you stop having ideas, but because the daily message that your ideas are not what this job requires is a message the creative system eventually believes. The internal editor, the one that used to sit quietly in the background, gets louder. The ideas come less often. The ones that arrive feel less worth pursuing. This is not a personality change. It is a response to an environment, but it compounds. Because creative confidence, once eroded, does not simply return when the environment changes. It has to be rebuilt. And rebuilding takes longer than the erosion did. Domain 4. Health. This one is the most documented and the least surprising, and still the most consistently underestimated by the people experiencing it. A pattern that appears reliably in research on occupational stress. The physiological signature of chronic low-grade misalignment, elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep architecture, compromised immune function, is indistinguishable from the signature of acute, high-grade stress. The body does not know the difference between "this is a crisis" and "this has been quietly wrong for 4 years." It responds to both with the same stress chemistry. What changes is that the acute version produces a recognizable alarm. The chronic version produces symptoms that get attributed to everything else: sleep problems, recurring illness, the specific kind of fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, tension that lives in the body without a name. Domain 5. Future optionality. This is the one that compounds most severely, and the one that people in the middle of it are least positioned to see. Research on what occupational psychologists call identity foreclosure shows a consistent pattern. The longer a person remains in a career that doesn't fit, the harder it becomes, cognitively and psychologically, to imagine themselves in a different one. Not because the options disappear, because the capacity to seriously consider them atrophies. The self that could have become other things, that had other skills, other curiosities, other trajectories, does not get stronger while you wait. It gets quieter, more theoretical, less available as a real option, and more available as a thing you tell yourself you'll do eventually. 5 domains. Relationships, cognitive vitality, creative capacity, health, future optionality. None of them labeled career problem in the moment they are being damaged. All of them quietly, specifically, paying for a choice that was made or not made years ago. Here is the mechanism that makes this more than a list of costs. These 5 domains do not degrade independently. They compound off each other. The relationship friction that comes from bringing the performance tax home that produces its own cognitive drain. The cognitive drain reduces creative output. The creative suppression contributes to the health picture. The health symptoms reduce the energy available to imagine the future differently. And the narrowed future imagination makes the relationship friction feel permanent rather than situational. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual structure of what long-term career misalignment does. It does not stay in its lane. It becomes the organizing principle around which everything else adjusts. And here is the part that matters most for the decision you are not yet ready to make. Every year this continues, the compound cost grows. But so does something else. The psychological distance between who you are now and the version of yourself that could make a different choice. Not because you become less capable, because the adaptation deepens. Because managing becomes more practiced. Because the future self who would have moved, who had more optionality, more creative confidence, more relational availability, becomes harder to access. The thing that keeps people in place is not, usually, that they cannot see the problem. It is that the cost of staying is invisible and the cost of leaving is visible. And invisible costs do not produce the urgency that visible costs do. But here is what changes when you see the full ledger. The cost of staying is not static. It is compounding. Every month you wait for more clarity before moving. The compound mechanism runs another cycle. Not dramatically, quietly. In the 5 domains that have nothing to do with your job title and everything to do with the life you are actually living. You have not been managing this. You have been paying for it. The difference between those 2 sentences is not small. Living inside one of them and the other are genuinely different experiences. The person who is managing has no particular reason to move. The person who is paying, who can see the ledger clearly, has a completely different relationship to the question of what comes next. That is what this section has been about. Not guilt, not urgency manufactured to produce a decision. The specific, sober clarity of someone who has finally looked at the full account. If this video has done its job, there is now a question sitting with you that wasn't there when you clicked. Not, should I change? That question has been there. The more specific question, which of these 5 cost patterns is the one most active in your life right now? There is a resource in the description built exactly for that. It takes under 10 minutes. It identifies which of 5 specific career pain patterns applies to your situation and what to address first. No quiz personality, no vague result, no pressure toward a decision you're not ready to make. Just the specific clarity of knowing which part of your ledger needs the most attention. Link is in the description. So what actually interrupts this? Not a leap, not a plan, not a decision you are nowhere near ready to make. One thing, a ledger check. Honest, specific, and contained enough to be done before this week ends. Here is what that looks like in practice. Take one of the 5 domains, just one, the one that landed hardest in this video. Relationships, cognitive vitality, creative capacity, health, future optionality. 1. And ask in writing this specific question. What has this domain looked like in the last 6 months compared to what it looked like 3 years ago? Not, am I happy with it? Not, is my career responsible for it? Just, what does the comparison show? The reason this works is not motivational, it is diagnostic. The compound mechanism hides in diffuse perception, the sense that things have just gradually gotten a little flatter, a little more managed, without a clear point of origin. Writing the comparison forces specificity, and specificity is what makes an invisible cost visible. You are not being asked to decide anything from that exercise. You are being asked to look at the ledger, that is all. Now, for the objection that is probably present right now. My situation is specific. The financial obligations, the age, the family context. This general framework doesn't account for those. That objection is fair, and it deserves a direct answer. The compound mechanism does not require a particular financial situation to operate. It does not exempt people with mortgages, with dependents, with late career timelines. It runs regardless of constraint. What changes with constraint is not whether the cost is accumulating. It is the pace and structure of the protection. Someone with a narrow financial runway does not make the same moves as someone with a wide one. But both of them benefit specifically and materially from knowing which part of their ledger is most depleted. Because the person who knows which domain is most damaged makes better decisions about everything that follows. They do not chase clarity as a prerequisite for movement. They use the specific knowledge of their own cost structure to identify the first honest step, the one their situation can actually support. The protection is not a plan, it is a practice of not looking away from the full ledger. One domain, one comparison, one honest look at what the past 6 months have actually cost. That is the size of the first step. Not a leap. One molecule of the stuck, moved, in a direction that the rest of the journey can follow. The video showed you the cost. The next step is understanding which specific pattern of that cost applies to your situation. The Career Clarity Audit in the description is built for exactly that. 10 minutes, 5 patterns, 1 clear starting point. Which of the 5 domains landed hardest for you? And when did you first notice it starting to shift? So here is what this video has actually been about. Not career dissatisfaction. You arrived with language for that. Not the general case for change. You have heard that argument before. This video has been about a specific, named, verifiable mechanism. The compound cost of staying in the wrong career accumulates across 5 domains that have nothing to do with your job title. It runs invisibly in currency your accounting system is not designed to track. And it makes change harder, not easier, with every year it runs unchecked. The name for what you have been doing is not managing. The name is paying, in installments, across accounts, in a direction that the people who love you can feel before you can name it. That is not a judgment. It is a description. And descriptions, precise ones, are the only things that actually change the relationship between a person and their situation. You are not someone who cannot be satisfied. You are someone who has been paying compound costs in invisible currency for long enough that the drain has started to feel like your baseline. Those are not the same thing. And the distance between them, between "this is just who I am now" and "this is what a specific mechanism has been doing to me," is not a small distance. It is the entire difference between a condition and a situation. Conditions are what you are. Situations are what you are in. Situations can change, not all at once, not without real complexity, not without the financial and relational and identity questions that are genuinely hard, but they change from a different starting point than conditions do. They change from the starting point of someone who has looked at the real ledger and knows specifically what they are dealing with. You are not more motivated than you were 15 minutes ago. You are more located. And located, knowing exactly where you are and what the terrain actually costs, is the more useful thing. Not broken, misaligned. Carry that.